Also, where does India stand in this mix? What role will India play in the looming conflicts of this century? We look forward to exploring all of this with you, Professor Mearsheimer. Welcome to Bharat Rising. My first question to you is, what would you call the current world order? How would you describe it? Would you say it's still unipolar, with America in the lead? Would you say it's truly multipolar? How would you see this?
I believe that the world today is multipolar. Most of you in the audience came of age during the unipolar moment, which ran from roughly 1991, when the Soviet Union collapsed, up until about 2017. And the United States was, of course, the most powerful state on the planet by far during the unipolar moment. But by 2017, roughly 2017, Vladimir Putin had rescued Russia from the dead, and Russia was back as a great power. And China, because of all of the economic growth that had taken place during the 1990s and the first 17 years of the 21st century, was also a great power. So we're now in a system where there are three great powers: the United States, China, and Russia.
What about India? Where do you see India standing in this? And do you see India then as a bridging power, trying to bridge different ideological camps? Or is India just tilting things in the direction that's suited?
Well, I would say, first of all, India is an aspiring great power. The two building blocks of power in the international system are population size and wealth. You need a great deal of wealth, and you need a lot of people to qualify as a great power. The reason that China was not considered a great power until recently was because it didn't have the wealth. It certainly had the population size. What China now has is population size plus wealth. What India has for sure is population size, and it's growing wealthier and wealthier by the year. But I think, according to most accounts, it has not yet reached the point where it qualifies as a great power. Nevertheless, there is no question that India is a major power, and it is, in a very important way, caught in between those three great powers, because India has all sorts of potential problems with China, mainly revolving around the border between those two countries. India has very close relations with both Russia and the United States, and from the American point of view, that causes problems because the Americans don't want India to have good relations with Russia. But of course, from India's point of view, it makes good sense to have good relations with Russia. So relations between India and the United States have been somewhat testy. They've been very good in terms of relations with Russia. And the question of China is, I think, a looming problem for India. But nevertheless, the world that India operates in now is very complicated, and India is going to have a complicated task moving forward dealing with this world.
Is another way of looking at it this, that India is best poised to make the most of this complicated situation, because India can talk to and do business with all camps?
I think at some point India will have to make some hard choices. I think the most interesting question is what happens between India, China, and the United States. My sense is that China will continue to grow more powerful, that it will build a potent blue water navy, and it will try to project power into the Persian Gulf, and it will therefore move through the Indian Ocean. And this will not make the Indians happy and will push the Americans and the Indians closer together.
In the event of a conflict between India and China, do you think Russia will be forced to take a side?
I think if there were a conflict between India and China, the Russians would do everything they could to sit on the fence and to not get committed. the Russians have no interest in having bad relations with either China or India. So if there was, and hopefully there will not be, a conflict between India and China, I think the Russians would do everything they could to stay far away.
You've said in the past that great powers will always seek hegemony or dominance over others. You say that India is an aspiring great power. When it does become a great power, do you think I would do the same? Because we've seen any or any of the rhetoric that comes with these hegemonic tendencies?
My basic view of international politics is that the ideal situation is to be a hegemon in your region of the world and to make sure that there's no other hegemon on the planet. And I basically argue that the United States is the only regional hegemon in the world. It's a hegemon in the Western Hemisphere. And the United States goes to great lengths to make sure that no other country dominates its region the way we dominate the Western Hemisphere. And that's why in the 20th century, we played a key role in putting Imperial Germany, Imperial Japan, Nazi Germany, and the Soviet Union on the scrap heap of history. The United States does not tolerate peer competitors. At the same time, I believe it makes eminently good sense for China to dominate Asia. I think that as China grows more powerful economically, it will try to dominate Asia. And I think from China's point of view, that makes good sense. From America's point of view, it does not make good sense. And certainly from India's point of view, it does not make good sense for China to dominate Asia. Just one final point. I would argue that if India were to grow more powerful than China, and the Chinese economy were to falter, and India's economy was to take off, and India looked like it could dominate Asia, it would try to dominate Asia. Not because of Indian culture or Indian politics, because that's just the way great power politics work. The best way to survive in the international system is to be really powerful.